The young woman stood in the doorway of the executive office with trembling hands, clutching a small gray lunch bag as though it held the last piece of her life together. Her eyes were red from holding back tears, and before security gently escorted her away after she was unexpectedly dismissed from her first day of work, she turned toward the CEO one final time. Barely above a whisper, she said only one sentence that no one else seemed to care about. "Please, don't throw away my lunch." The CEO barely looked up from the mountain of contracts on his desk. To him, it sounded like the desperate request of another employee who had simply run out of luck. But less than an hour later, curiosity would lead him to unzip the forgotten lunch bag, and what he discovered inside would completely change not only her future, but his own life forever. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness, compassion, and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment about where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another inspiring story. Alexander Hayes was known across the business world as a brilliant CEO who built one of America's largest technology companies from almost nothing. Newspapers admired his intelligence, investors respected his discipline, and employees feared his impossible standards. Every minute of his day was planned. Every decision was based on numbers instead of emotions. Years earlier, after losing both his parents within months of each other while struggling to keep his company alive, Alexander quietly convinced himself that feelings only distracted people from success. His office overlooked the city skyline, but despite the breathtaking view, his life had become painfully empty. Wealth had given him everything except peace. Across the city lived Emily Carter, a 26-year-old woman whose life had become a constant battle against impossible circumstances. After her mother passed away from cancer, Emily became the only guardian of her younger brother Noah, a bright 12-year-old boy suffering from a rare heart condition. Every paycheck she earned disappeared into rent, groceries, school supplies, and hospital bills. She worked nights cleaning offices and spent mornings searching for better opportunities. When she finally received an interview at Hayes Technologies, she believed it was the miracle she had prayed for. Emily arrived early, professionally dressed in clothes she had borrowed from a neighbor. She smiled despite sleeping only 3 hours the night before. She carried only one personal item besides her handbag, a small insulated lunch bag. It wasn't expensive. Its zipper was worn, and one corner had been carefully stitched by hand. To everyone else, it looked ordinary. To Emily, it contained something priceless. Unfortunately, her first day turned into a disaster she never expected. A software update accidentally erased several files during orientation. Although the mistake had been caused by outdated training computers, the confusion reached senior management. A supervisor, desperate to protect his own position, blamed Emily. Without investigating the situation, Human Resources informed Alexander, who authorized her immediate dismissal. He never even learned her name. As Emily gathered her belongings, the lunch bag accidentally slipped beneath a chair inside the executive conference room where orientation had taken place earlier. Embarrassed and emotionally exhausted, she realized security was already escorting her toward the exit. She rushed back only long enough to softly plead with the CEO not to throw it away before leaving the building forever. Alexander ignored the request and returned to work. Nearly an hour later, while searching for a missing presentation folder, he noticed the forgotten lunch bag sitting quietly beside the conference table. His assistant suggested throwing it into the trash, but something about the young woman's desperate expression lingered in his memory. Almost against his own instincts, he picked it up and slowly opened the zipper. Inside wasn't an expensive meal. There was a simple peanut butter sandwich wrapped carefully in wax paper, a small apple, and a reusable water bottle. Beneath them rested a folded envelope. On the front were the words, written in neat handwriting, "For Noah, if anything happens to me today." Alexander hesitated before opening it. The letter wasn't meant for him, but something told him it explained everything. Emily had written that if she failed to get the job, she didn't know how she would continue paying for Noah's medication. She apologized to her younger brother for not always being able to buy his favorite foods and promised she would never stop trying. She explained that she had packed only half of the sandwich because Noah needed the larger half for school. At the bottom of the page was a child's drawing showing two stick figures holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. Written in uneven handwriting were the words, "My sister is my superhero." For the first time in years, Alexander couldn't finish reading without wiping tears from his eyes. The lunch wasn't just food. It was the entire story of a family refusing to give up. He immediately ordered an investigation into Emily's dismissal. Within 20 minutes, the truth emerged. She had never made the mistake. The supervisor responsible had lied to protect himself. Alexander canceled every meeting for the afternoon. Using the address listed on her employment documents, he personally drove across the city until luxury skyscrapers disappeared and aging apartment buildings filled the streets. He found Emily sitting on the front steps of her apartment, staring silently at the lunch bag she thought she had lost forever. She looked shocked when the black executive car stopped in front of her. Alexander handed her the lunch bag without saying much at first. Then he apologized, not as a CEO protecting his reputation, but as a human being who had forgotten that every employee carried invisible battles. Emily expected another rejection. Instead, she received an offer to return immediately with full pay, additional training, and flexible hours so she could care for Noah's medical appointments. But Alexander wasn't finished. After quietly reviewing Noah's medical records through the company's charitable foundation, he discovered that one specialized surgery could dramatically improve the boy's future. The waiting list was long, and the cost was beyond anything Emily could imagine. Without announcing it publicly or allowing his name to appear anywhere, Alexander personally funded the operation. Months passed. Noah slowly recovered, returning to school with more energy than he had ever known. Emily became one of the company's most respected project managers, admired not because of sympathy but because of her extraordinary work ethic and honesty. She introduced new employee support programs that ensured every worker facing family emergencies received understanding instead of immediate punishment. Unexpectedly, those programs reduced employee turnover and increased company performance more than any business strategy Alexander had introduced in years. One ordinary lunch bag had transformed an entire corporate culture. Alexander often kept Noah's childhood drawing framed inside his office, not to remind himself of charity, but to remind himself that behind every resume, every uniform, and every forgotten lunch sits a human story that numbers can never measure. Years later, employees would still tell new hires about the mysterious lunch bag that changed the CEO forever. Most believed the miracle happened because of the letter. The truth was deeper than that. The miracle happened because one man finally chose curiosity over judgment, compassion over assumptions, and kindness over convenience. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with your friends and family, subscribe to the channel, and help us spread more stories that remind the world kindness still exists. Before this story ends, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you had found that lunch bag? Sometimes the smallest things people ask us to protect are carrying the greatest burdens we cannot see. A forgotten lunch, a handwritten note, or a simple act of mercy can become the turning point in someone's entire life. And perhaps the greatest success any person can ever achieve is not building a fortune, but becoming the reason someone else never loses hope.